somehow got this order to do it by democratic decisions. Yes. Yes, next group. So you're into that, that you see these different interests, and you're also already balancing them on your own in your mind. Yes, yes. Your own. Yes, you're right. I think that's it. Yes. Anything more? Next group, please. Want to add anything about stakeholding, your own stakeholdership? Yes. So you're a stakeholder in the mountains. Me too. Yeah. Ah, that's yeah. Com- cultural heritage. Cultural heritage. Yes. You have an advisory function, and you see that objectivity is an important thing in that advisory function. Mhm. We should try not to be, at least. Yes. Yeah. Sorry, it's really fine. Yes, Ilona. So you're actually an ambassador for cultural heritage. Yes. Making people, teaching people about what is happening down or not happening down there. Yes. So you're at the same time an ambassador, informer, and a little bit a stakeholder, because you want to have these things preserved, isn't it? Yes, yes. Hmm. Hmm. Make it accessible and that people can. Yes, yes. Thomas, you were. We're very coastal, many of us, yes? Are we stakeholders as there as well? Most of us. Would you agree with Thomas' statement that we are mostly coastal stakeholders by our own? Maybe not by profession. If we think about Nico, for instance. The Baltic Sea is a lake, and yeah, we have the economic zone. Okay, you mean that? Yes. So you say Helcom has, so to say, affected that the Baltic Sea there was no oil and gas prospection, and it's an environmental organization. There could be oil. I would like you to come back to this when you do your presentation, because now we need to go forward. But this is it's something that is interesting to discuss, and also the role of organizations or rather conventions like HELCOM with the environmental perspective and how they affect this. Is there anything now the people sitting here would like to share with the rest of the group? One enthusiast, Anuka. You're not enthusiasts. More like a sea scout or a tour guide. Yeah. On the old ships, yes. That's nice. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anything more? Otherwise, I would like actually to leave the floor and also the microphone to Nico, coming with the first maritime shipping perspective. We will have a break when it is time for coffee. I will look at your eyes. And everyone who is now presenting is presenting his or her perspective from both a more planning point of view and from a more stakeholder point of view. And we will have a plenary discussion with a panel here just after this, and then we will have lunch. And in the afternoon we will work in groups and more practically with this stakeholder perspective. And I will introduce this after lunch. And in the evening we will have two special guests, Charles Ehler and Tizia Kalker, who will talk about their respective countries. Now I leave the mic to Nico.
Okay, good morning everybody. So this seems to work. Excellent. Okay, good morning everybody. I would like to start the session on stakeholders and users with the issue of shipping. And I would like to give you first this overview, as shipping and fisheries is one of the most traditional and oldest uses of the sea. But then we are realizing that shipping and fishery as well are not there any longer on their own. We have a lot of other activities, and here the North Sea example is illustrating it quite well, because it shows the density of all the uses, with oil and gas industry, the platforms being built, sand and gravel extractions, pipelines, power and telecommunication cables already laying in the sea, military training, exercises, scientific research and nature conservation sites are other functions and activities and uses taking place. And to mention as well, the offshore wind farms, which have a special relevance for shipping, of course. And if we think about the idea of having 5,000 or 8,000 offshore wind turbines in the sea, in the North Sea and in the Baltic Sea, then you see this is of special importance for the shipping and for shipping as a stakeholder. So they used to say, well, the sea is ours, and now the shipping and the fishermen, they have to realize they are not there on their own any longer. And this is a threat to them, because now they have to argue, they have to start discussions, they have to say where their interest and where their stakes are, and this is a totally new world for them. Shipping is privileged. In legal terms, it's privileged as we say that in the territorial sea, the sovereignty of the coastal sea, the coastal state, is limited by the right of innocent passage. That means that every ship on a peaceful mission can transfer the territorial sea. So we have here, coming from UNCLOS, United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, a privilege for shipping in the territorial sea, and this is limiting as well, of course, the rights of the coastal state to introduce maritime spatial planning. Innocent passage must always be guaranteed and safeguarded by the coastal state. In the EEZ, the rights of third parties are pronounced even stronger. There we have for all states, coastal states and landlocked states as well, the freedom of navigation. And the only restriction by a coastal state, which this state can carry out, is to exercise exclusive rights and jurisdictions, for instance, to establish artificial islands, such as oil and gas platforms, structures and installations, for example, offshore wind farms, and to introduce safety zones around them. But it's very important to keep in mind that a coastal state may not unilaterally introduce sea lanes for international navigation, and may not tell in the exclusive economic zone other states where they have to go with their ships in terms of international navigation. That would be the competence of IMO. In Article 60, Para 7 of UNCLOS, it stated that artificial islands, installations and structures and the safety zones around them may not be established where interference may be caused to the use of recognized sea lanes essential to international navigation. This is another clear example of the privilege of shipping and how it is protected under UNCLOS. When you look at the Baltic Sea area here between Sweden, Denmark, Poland and Germany, because of the dense traffic in the Baltic Sea and with the goal of avoiding collisions between ships and to avoid groundings as well, traffic separation schemes have been introduced, and that means that by this introduction by IMO there are certain rules where ships have to go and which area they may not use. And this is, for instance, very interesting in that area where it's comparatively shallow, roughly 17 meters, and to avoid groundings, it is really, there are clear traffic rules which way ships have to go in order to avoid collisions here. That gets a bit clearer when you look at these AIS data, which gives you information on the distribution of traffic, on the intensity of traffic. You can clearly identify ferry routes between Swinoujscie and Ystad, for example, and you can identify the big traffic coming from the Baltic states, from Russia, of the oil transport to the direction of Denmark. And here you see an overview AIS data with the main traffic routes through the Baltic Sea, and you see very clear patterns of traffic, sometimes based simply on the water depth, sometimes on distance to the coast. And you see, for instance, that here you have a high amount of dense traffic. So from this overview, from the planning history for the German spatial plan for the EEZ, there are just 2 points of interest in this context: that we received input on shipping statistics and the AIS data from the Water and Shipping Directorate, and that was for us a comparatively easy task because this directorate is under the umbrella of the same ministry, so it was very easy to receive this data in order to simply to get an overview on the activities on the sea, what is happening. And it's very difficult to get in contact with fishermen to ask them, where are your preferred shipping grounds? And they simply said, you're not receiving any information from us, the sea is ours, we're fishing everywhere, because my grandfather has already done it, and don't you think that you can disturb me? So it was easier with shipping, because there you have this AIS data, you have a lot of collection, and the shipping agencies all over the Baltic Sea work together, so it was very simple to get there an overview. When I look at the public participation, shipping as a stakeholder had a strong voice, but this was done via professional channels. For instance, the German Ship Owner Association, which is quite influential in Germany, although in Germany we just have roughly 400 ships under German flag, but there are a lot of ships on a bareboat charter, roughly 4,000 ships flying the flag of Liberia, Antigua and Barbuda, but the ownership is in Germany. So it is a big representative and a big stakeholder, the Ship Owner Association. And we have nautical clubs representing yacht owners, sailing boat owners, and they of course made themselves heard. So it was not the individual yacht owner who gave an opinion on the draft maritime spatial plan, and it is represented via these professional stakeholders. This might be a cultural thing, I do not know. It will be definitely look different when you go into the territorial sea. The closer, for instance, the planning comes to the coast, or wind farm comes to the coast, the more the individual will raise their voice. But in the EEZ, we just dealt with these professional stakeholders here from the shipping industry. And they all have been concerned, of course, with the biggest conflict, shipping versus offshore wind energy. When they hear that you roughly introduce 5,000 or 8,000 turbines in the sea, they all see the potential danger, the collisions, and maybe the deviations ships must take. So there was a big concern, and that was a big discussion, and one of the most prominent points in the public participation for this EEZ plan. Because of the macroeconomic importance of shipping and the arguments delivered by the shipping stakeholders and shipping industry, how important they are for export and import in Germany as an industrial nation, and because of the legal privilege granted to shipping under UNCLOS, we took them up into the guidelines for the spatial plan and called it Securing and Strengthening Maritime Traffic, keeping exactly in mind and arguing with certain statistical information on the macroeconomic importance of shipping for Germany. But at the same time, we have this government strategy for offshore wind energy. Switching off nuclear power plants means looking for alternative resources, and this is not necessarily coal and gas plants, so there's a big need for offshore wind energy. And there are natural competitors. So this issue, the conflict between shipping and wind energy, had to be solved, and we decided then to take the shipping lanes identified with the help of the AIS data as the basic structure of the maritime spatial plan, and said that the most important traffic routes are priority areas and must be kept free from any obstacles. And in reservation areas, in buffer areas, shipping has a special weight in the balancing process. When you look at the final outcome, the spatial plan, and if you look at the designated areas for offshore wind, the two red areas, you can imagine that roughly 200 windmills can be built here and 80 here. What do you think will be the impacts on shipping? What does it mean in practice? Suppose these wind farms are built. How would you deal with that as a planner? Yeah? Buffer zones or safety zones? And what would be the meaning of safety zones? Yeah. Well, safety zone in the meaning of UNCLOS means they may not, ships may not go there. So you have a maximum 500 meter circle around them where shipping is prohibited. So that's the only way you can protect the installations and avoid collisions. So what do you think, what does the shipping world react to that, if you think of the yacht owners and sailing boat owners? They don't agree, yes. And what would you argue as a representative of a yacht owner and sailing boat owner? Yeah. Yeah, that's simple, sometimes it is. So the argument was, yeah, well, we are not disturbed by the wind farm. We as an experienced yacht owner, we are traveling so many times between Denmark, Sweden and Germany in the summertime with our yachts and sailing boats. We are not disturbed by the wind farms. We could sail through the wind farm. So what do you think about this? Agree, disagree? Under which conditions? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, Eugenius? The company, exactly. They're the owner of the installations. They have a say as well. That's true. Okay. Jacek? Yeah, that's legal reasoning, but just if you think of the basic interests of the parties involved, Agne? Hmm. That's a good point. Yeah. So if you look at the wind farms in the exclusive economic zone, you get a license for the exact location for the wind farm. So you're not licensed in area, you're licensed, let's say, 80 structures. So the solution found was that in the sake of the stability and integrity of the installations, it is prohibited to go there with fishing gear like bottom trawling, etc., because you could damage the installations, and as well it could be too dangerous for the fishing boats capsizing. Another issue was taken by our shipping directorate, and they said, well, if we look at our neighbors and some experiences from Denmark, we could allow sailing boats and yachts smaller, 24 meters, to sail through. So they ordered, under good weather conditions, with a certain visibility, it is allowed to sail through an offshore wind farm when it's in operation, not of course in the building phase, but when it's in operation. They say that all ships smaller than 24 meters are allowed to sail through. And this was a big relief. This was not done in a spatial plan, but that was later on, more on the project level, published as an order looking at the good examples from Danish wind farms where it is allowed to sail through a wind farm, and that was a sort of a good agreement with sailing boat owners and yacht boat owners, that they know exactly that they, in theory and under certain conditions, are allowed to sail through a wind farm. Same would be true for a fishing boat, smaller 24 meters, when it's not using the gear. So just passing through the wind farm. Yes. It is published in the official notices to mariners. It is published, I think, on the sea maps, that there is an indication and an explanation. There are certain books on shipping in the North Sea and Baltic Sea, and it was communicated because, of course, this yacht owner association complained to the minister, and then it was discussed with the yacht owner association which options are possible. Okay, Lars. Yeah. Okay. Concerning the first question, in the Baltic Sea, it was like quite quickly established what are the main routes, and the main route is either an international recognized sea route, or we said that we have a passage number or movements of more than 1,200 or 1,500 per year. So this was like the advice from our shipping colleagues, that whenever you have more than 3-4 movements per day, then we call it an important shipping route. And that's what we learned then from the Polish colleagues about the numbers here. We got a detailed information. Then we said, yes, then we make it a priority lane. There was an analysis done for the North Sea, Lars, because there were some ideas. Okay, let's suppose the traffic via the Arctic will strongly rise. What does it mean for the German Bight and for the traffic coming from Netherlands going to the north? But our shipping colleague said that with these structure of priority and reservation areas, they are happy. That gives them enough space for the next years. Although they know that bigger ships will come, like the big Emma Maersk class, they have different behavior under certain weather conditions, but they say just when you look at the spatial pattern, that's enough for them. But they try to anticipate future developments. And looking at marine navy or military interests, yeah, we had this discussion, of course, because they are, for instance, arguing this wind farm could interfere with telecommunication systems. And in the North Sea, there are big problems because we always have, in the history we had the privilege for offshore wind farm in the project level. So the only arguments to deny an application for wind farm was shipping and marine environment. And that means that in theory you can license a lot of offshore wind farms in military training exercise areas. But now it was getting a bit too much. So the law was changed, and military defense interests have been taken on board as one of a valid reason to turn down an application for an offshore wind farm. So there was a bit too much enthusiasm to support offshore wind, but that was then changed, and now we have a more pronounced situation of military interests. Thomas? That's the maximum allowed under UNCLOS. So that's maximum 500 meters. Yeah. Andreas? Yeah. Monitoring offenses against traffic rules is done by the police. It's Coast Guard, for instance, and similar institutions, and they look for offenses and have to publish fines and follow that. And there was your second question, I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly. It can exactly at sea. It can happen in a very short time. So there are certain details given in this public order on the sea state, on the weather conditions, on the visibility, and so they try to make it as practical as possible. But they're really getting into the detail. Yeah. Jacek. Yeah. Yeah, there's no definition on the UNCLOS. That is our approach. So there are, so to speak, we like the first mover who had for the first time had to think about this issue. So we are quite optimistic that we solved this conflict between shipping and offshore wind energy. We discussed it with all the shipping agencies and ship owners. Of course, you can never avoid deviations, but it's still possible to use the sea in a very efficient way. And that's why we looked at the big, maybe it gets clear when you look at the North Sea. No, and it is how to say, nearly impossible to sue against directly a maritime spatial plan. You can go to court when the designations of a spatial plan is implemented into practice. Then the judge will say, okay, the basis for this offshore wind energy area is the maritime spatial plan, and then the judge can indirectly look at the validity of the maritime spatial plan. But that's a complicated procedure, and one says that the maritime spatial plan is binding, but just for other agencies, not for the public, and the agencies have to implement the maritime spatial plan based on their sectorial competences. Just to give you another idea of the importance of ship traffic, when you look here at the North Sea area, you have coming from the Netherlands up to Denmark this amount of traffic. You have the traffic separation schemes here with a big traffic here directly at the coast, and for instance all ships carrying dangerous goods, chemicals, etc., they have to take the northern traffic separation schemes in order to be as distant as possible to the coast. But you see that the amount of traffic is simply enormous, and there are international rules. I'm coming back to Andreas' questions. There are these COLREG rules, international under IMO agreed rules on avoiding collision in the maritime area, and there you have really detailed traffic rules, how to behave in international waters when you're sailing. So here we have the same approach, the shipping lanes as the basic structure of the draft. Here I would like to show you not only that transboundary cooperation is very important when you look at the international sea uses such as shipping. I would like to show you this example. We sit together with our Dutch colleagues and said, how can we deal with the issue of offshore wind energy? You see here the applied offshore wind farms between two traffic separation schemes where a lot of traffic is taking place. And then we recognize that we have a different safety philosophy in Germany and in the Netherlands. And at the first time our Dutch colleagues said, well, we have a safety zone of 500 meters written in UNCLOS, so that should be enough between an offshore wind farm and a traffic separation scheme. And we said, well, hold on, is it possible for you that we agree on at least a bit bigger distance between offshore wind farms and traffic separation schemes? And in the end, we could agree on a minimum distance of 2 nautical miles plus 500 meter safety zone between an offshore wind farm and an established traffic separation scheme. And this was done because of bilateral discussions. There are no rules in UNCLOS or wherever. What is the minimum distance between offshore wind farms as a newcomer and established traffic separation schemes? And I'm very happy that here on the Dutch side they followed the approach. So all the wind farms, they are more or less on Dutch side. On the German side, they are planned in one line with the same distance to the traffic separation schemes. And that's of course making the life of a captain much easier. And this was a big success in bilateral consultations to agree on this minimum standard. Okay, Guido. Yeah, yeah. Risk assessments has been done. They have been done in project levels. For instance, if you apply here for an offshore wind farm, you must hand in a risk assessment. What is the theoretical, probabilistic collision rate between a ship and an offshore wind farm? It's very interesting to come to cumulative risk assessments. If there's a neighborhood of 6-7 wind farms, then these 6-7 wind farms are taken as one wind farm, and then you must assess how often a collision and an accident will happen, and based on this outcome you can give a license or you have to deny the application. And that was done on a more global level for the EEZ North Sea Baltic Sea, in order to get a feeling how dangerous is it to designate offshore wind farm area in this highly or this area with a high use by shipping. That's in the making. That's a very complicated, typical German discussion because we have the federal level and the state level. Who is doing what, like search and rescue, emergency, firefighting, etc., first aid. And there is a big discussion who is doing what in the territorial sea and in the exclusive economic zone. There is a system of emergency tugs. These emergency tugs are already there, but they are not necessarily already in that capacity of reacting to wind farms and the input on traffic. So this system will be improved to have emergency tugs. Sometimes we have the obligation for the owner of a wind farm to later organize an own private tug, because he is like putting additional risk to the marine shipping world, and he then has to take the remedy against this additional risk in order to get a license. Yeah? Yeah. Okay. You are happy? I'm happy? Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, 2:30.
Yes, okay. Yeah. Yeah. I can borrow your mine if you like. Okay. May I just open my presentation to be sure? Is it possible to open? Okay. Yeah, I think so. I have to use this one. O. Co? Nie, już to zrzuciłam, tylko nie wiem gdzie. In this one? Ah, okay. In which one? In this one? Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay, my name is Iwona Pomian. I'm working in the Polish Maritime Museum in Gdańsk, which is also mm, responsible for the protection of underwater cultural heritage in the waters which belongs to the Pomeranian district. We are also a kind of expert for our Minister of Culture, and we have a very good cooperation with Marine Institute and with Maritime Office in Gdynia, which about I will tell a little bit later on. What shall I say? We are in the starting point in the cooperation with the people who are responsible for the spatial planning, so be patient with my presentation. I should say also that from longer than 20 years we have a working group for the protection of the cultural heritage on the Baltic Sea, and one of the more active subgroups in this organization is subgroup responsible for underwater cultural heritage. From this year I am the chairwoman, I don't know, chairman of this group, so I have also possibility to compare a different system of protection in each Baltic country, and there is a huge difference between the countries, especially old eastern part of the Baltic and the western. Okay, so first, and of course I will show you examples of our way how we try to solve this problem in Poland. So a few words about the organization. We have two ministers who are responsible for everything what is going on the sea, Ministry of Transport, Construction and Maritime Economy, and our Ministry of Culture and National Heritage. Our museum is one of 16, as I remember, national museums, and we have also a person who is responsible for the protection of management. This is the general conservator. Some years ago he was more scientist, now this is rather politician, but anyway he's responsible. And how it's organized in Poland, we have National Register of the Monuments and provincial conservators of the monuments. They are responsible for the protection of cultural heritage. As you maybe know, we have two provinces which belongs to the Baltic Sea, Western Pomeranian and Pomeranian, and we have strong cooperation with Pomeranian conservator. And Polish Maritime Museum, when I'm working, is responsible for this cooperation. A museum has to take care about the register of underwater archaeological sites, competences of the Pomeranian Provincial Conservator and Ancient Monuments within the range of underwater cultural protection. We also have archaeological researchers, and we are responsible for the education, so nearly for everything. And I think education is very important part of this work. And of course we have to cooperate with maritime offices, because they are responsible for all administration decision about activity around the cultural heritage which is located in the sea. As you probably know better than me, we have a few international conventions which touch this point. The most important for us, not ratified by Poland yet, but we hope will be ratified till 2016. The UNESCO Convention. Oh, I'm sorry, but it's a mistake. So, of course, about the World Cultural Heritage and Natural UNESCO, I was talking about the new convention. It was signed in 2001, and this is UNESCO Convention for the Protection of Underwater Cultural Heritage. And this one convention is what we expect will ratify next 2 years. Next one is so-called La Valletta Convention, generally about the archaeology and protection of cultural heritage. And European Landscape Convention was also ratified, but I don't know if it is active in Poland. And is connected with underwater cultural heritage, which I will try to prove by some examples later on. And our legal settlements, of course, Constitution and Act of Protection of the sites of the historic interest, and you can see all these law regulations. So it is defined quite clearly what is protected in our country. We have also a special audience from the Minister of Infrastructure connected to this subject. And when we are coming into the spatial planning, we would like to have something like this guide, which guidelines, which was prepared for the specialist who takes care about the cultural heritage on land. Unfortunately, was never prepared something like this for underwater Baltic cultural heritage. But anyway, we try to use some of the points of these guidelines. And why so? Yeah, first we should say what can be important and interesting with so strange things, which is underwater, which is invisible, which is so difficult to visit, mostly destroyed. When you are looking for the arguments that it can give the feeling for the national or regional identity, yes, that's also very difficult to explain, because especially when you are talking about the wrecks, our wrecks are on your waters, so it's quite difficult to to explain it as our history. But then we should think that this is our history from the Baltic point or Europe point of view, and that's the reason why it's so important. And just a few words about why Baltic is so special, because as you know, Baltic has a rather fresh water and high salinity, and that's the reason of the quality of the object which were made from, especially from wood. They are in a great condition. I'm sure our Swedish or Finnish colleagues, they can explain us about wrecks which are nearly completely on the same condition. I'm sorry for my English, but it is so important for me. So, but they are even with mast on the bottom. You can visit whole wrecks like it was in 17th century. So it's really important. But not only wrecks, our Dutch colleagues and Danish colleagues and German colleagues, they could explain how important is underwater cultural landscape, because we can observe the changes from the 11,000 years ago till medieval, till Nordic period, and you can find the beautiful objects which are 6,000 years old, and you can show it to the people and explain why it was so important. Okay, so maybe we will go to the more precise definition. What is the object of a monument from our point of view? In our Polish regulation, everything can be a monument. It depends from the value, from the historical or scientific point of view. You have also a more precise definition, but still a very wide. And what is important, of course, you have to have some methods for the protection. So we have 4 methods of the protection: registration in National Register of Monument, recognition as a monument of the history, creating of the cultural park, and establish protection in local developing plan. And that's the most important, because when they are preparation for the establish the protection in local developing plan, then you can give also all information which are not in the National Register of the Monuments. From the 2011, we had changes in our Act of Protection of Cultural Heritage, and from this time, maritime offices are responsible to create and to keep register of the evidence of the cultural objects which are underwater in our seas. So they should give all this information into the plan when we'll be developing a plan, spatial plan for the ARAS. A few words about the complication with our waters. So, as you know, we have 12 miles territorial waters, and in these waters, Act of Protection of Cultural Heritage can work in a whole context. In the EEZ, can work only partly. The problem is that we are not able to control all these areas, and I suppose persons from the Maritime Office could talk a little bit more about it. For example, we have very interested wrecks around 40 kilometers from the coast, and in the practical life it's completely impossible to take care about it. Now a few words about the potential. That's what I thought. I will show you a few examples from our waters. So here you have submerged forest, which was dated around 8,000 years before. And on the base of these studies was made a reconstruction and also paleolandscape reconstruction. So that's maybe for most of the countries that's usual practice, but it was completely new for us to start to understand the changes of the bottom and the history of the bottom. When you are looking for the plans with the location of the wind farms, you can see that these areas which were planned for the wind farms, they are exactly in the areas I will show you where we can expect it also the gravel removing. In the spaces, in the areas where we had the land few thousand years ago, and everywhere here we can expect submerged Stone Age settlements. But how to present it to the people? I can understand that you have imagination about the underwater cultural heritage as a stone which can block infrastructure activity in the region. No, we just try to inform that this is important, that you should remember about it, and we have to find a solution how to cooperate and how to present, but also how to protect it, if it is possible. So when we are looking for example, one of the planned wind farm is located here. When you will move back in the time, you can see is located exactly on the bank of the Słupska Bank. And it was the reason that we would like to have a study for the Paleolithic, for the Stone Age landscape in these areas. And the last information, that's what I told Baltic. It was a huge sailing road, and we can expect all kinds of examples of the wrecks and cargo and all things connected to this activity. So you can see the settlements of the villages, but the harbors, like it is in Puck, and we are working now with this area. This is nearly 12 hectares on the bottom, only with a wooden construction. So shall we protect 12 hectares of bottom and then we'll stop activity for the small town in this region? No, it's impossible. So how shall we behave with this problem? Maybe we shall cover a part of this construction, maybe we shall remove it, but then how shall we show it on the surface? It will be boring. So that's a kind of the issues which we have. Okay, and we have also such a nice things. For example, as I know, in Sweden, fines as a canon, they are not under the umbrella of the Protection Act because you have so many such sites. But for us, this is very special. And a few years ago was found a site with 43 iron cannons from 17th century. So we moved just 8, and the rest of them, they are still on the bottom, more than 40 kilometers from the coast without any protection. How shall we show the information to the people? Shall we inform to the public where, in which place precisely it is located? I'm afraid we have not very long time to have possibility to see it because it will just disappear. And such a nice thing. They are maybe not very interesting from the historical or archaeological point of view because this is just a pottery from 19th century, but it's a very nice one, very popular. So if we will give such a information, how shall we protect it? How shall we give the possibility to the public to visit it? And the last sample, this is map which will show you changes of the coastline and wrecks around the Gdańsk harbor, which is a huge port and with a lot of divers. You can see the changes of the red line. This is a modern coastline, and here you have changes from 17th till 19th century. Everywhere here was entered to the Gdańsk, old entered to the Gdańsk harbor. It changed like this. So in each year we had a lot of wrecks in this area, and when you are looking for the map, now you can see this is a situation from the last year. All those wrecks are from 15th till 19th century, and they are located between the main entrance to the Gdańsk and North Harbor. So probably in the future it will be some investments in this area. So we have to prepare. And that's all what we know about the wrecks which are on the surface. But we made also geological reconstruction of this area. So we can expect also wrecks which are under bottom. So they are the wishes. And what kind of condition of wrecks? 200 meters from coast, you can see 16th century wreck still with a cargo connected with the barrels and with tin plates and others. We don't know what's inside. We only made an inventory of these wrecks. So, conclusions. Responsibilities are established for the care of the historic environment. Find sites first only for professional surveyors of the seabed. Ratified international convention, and that's what I told the UNESCO convention about underwater cultural heritage. As I know, Germany has a plan to ratify this convention in next year. Finland is thinking very seriously about this convention. Lithuania ratified it 5 years ago, something like this, and will be the next one, I hope. Education for public, of course, elaboration of understandable standards and guides. Thank you very much. Maybe.
Now, yeah. Thank you very much, Ilona. I wonder whether there are questions to Ilona. We have a few minutes left. Please, Nico, and then Mara. Eller Agne. And yes, Nico?
I'm sorry. I know. Yes, we are going to do it because I think it was a very long discussion and also on international level. Shall we give such information if we are not able to protect it permanently or not? But in my opinion, we should do it without very detailed information, just the information that on the bottom is protected wreck. Because if you will not give such information, you can't expect that people will take care about it. They can always explain, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that it was something on the bottom. So, yes.
There was a question there. Yep.
We have first time, I think, in our country, we will start with a national plan of protection of the monuments. And in this plan was a chapter dedicated only to the ratification of the UNESCO Convention. But in this chapter was few sub-chapters. So to analyze situation of the protection of underwater cultural heritage in Poland, to prepare some propozycje zmian prawnych, legal changes to grow up the better protection, but we have no special organization dedicated to this issue. Money, yeah. But so that's what I showed, that we just put it into the national plan, and it is connected with some funds, but it was defined only for the ratification of the convention. But that's what I thought. It was some sub-chapters, and they are very small, of course.
There was a question from Lars as well.
Of course, it depends case from case, and that's what I thought, that we are in the starting point, and rather we try to learn how to cooperate with spatial planners in to solve these problems, but. Of course, maybe I'm talking in a very emotional way because I'm working with this, but we try to find a way as much as possible objective. Do not stop any other activities, to try to find the connection with other activities, to use the occasion from other activities to grow up the knowledge about the cultural heritage, and also to learn how to make it more popular for the public. So, yeah. But may I tell a little about it, because it was also a strong discussion about it. One of the strongest points of the UNESCO Convention is to protect in situ. And to remove it to the other space is only in a very special occasions. And also I can't agree with you that there is no tools to protect in EEZ, especially on the Baltic, because like it was made some years ago in Denmark, first we can make a double protection zone, which means 24 nautical miles. Yeah, you can
Contiguous zone.
continuous zones, and yes, so we can do it. Second one, with which we try to work in our international cooperation, is to prepare the floor for the international porozumienie? Agreement for the protection of cultural heritage in the Baltic Sea, because it is a very special environment and objects are very, very special. Also from the word point of view. I mean the quality of the objects. What were unique? Yes. Yes, they have. I'm sorry. They have. We have in the true. We have 3 areas like this. One is Baltic. The second one, huge Canadian lakes, but they have much younger objects. And the last one is the Black Sea, about the deep water of the Black Sea, because they have a non-oxic atmosphere on the bottom. And that's also the reason on very good condition we have wrecks from the 15th century, which looks like they escaped from the harbor a few days ago. With the ropes, with anchors, with everything.
So there is actually an advantage with eutrophication. If you have anoxic sediments, you have not too much life.
But I prefer to have clear water, nice water. Also, I should say I'm working in this branch quite long time, because yesterday I noticed I'm working 30 years underwater, so it's quite a huge time. And that's very sad when I can observe how worse and worse water is in the Baltic. I'm not a specialist, but I can say you that it looks terribly bad.
We will come back to this
Okay.
with regard to that. I have seen that Rika has one question, and then the floor is open for you. But after this question, I would suggest that everyone grabs coffee and sits down again and stretches a little bit before that, and then we continue with Rico. But first you get a question to Ilona.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I should mention that that this is a new branch also of tourism, wreck tourism, and it's so important to take care about the quality of this branch, because if you will open it without any education and control, it means it will be destroyed in next 100 years. Good.
I think I would one more, but then we really need to change. We can continue this discussion. This is not the end, but one more question, and then we switch speakers.
So that's what I told. It depends from case to case. You have always evaluate what is really important. You can have an old wreck which will have no historical value, and you have you can have something what is looks beautifully, but not for the museum. And also you can have something what is quite modern, but from the historical point of view can be very important. And I should say that in the last 10 years it changed a lot, because some of you, like my colleague, we remember that some years ago wrecks from the Second World War, they were just obstacles, nothing more. Remember what happened with Titanic. Now it's one of the most important cultural objects underwaters. Yeah, and what Shreya, what can we tell more? UNESCO committee, they decided that the next year will be zadedykowane, devoted to the underwater cultural heritage connected with the First World War. And why? Because our Belgium colleagues, they are very active in the UNESCO committee, and they are interested about such a cultural heritage. So it depends from the point of view.
Thank you very much, Ivona. We are looking forward to having you here. I hope you will stay for the whole day. Yes, yes, yes. Because there's a lot of very interesting things you have to tell us. Thanks a lot. So I think it's time actually for a coffee break. You have been sitting for 1.5 hours. So please have a break, and we continue in 20 minutes.
Was it 20 minutes? Oh, okay, okay.
I realized
Tu przed panem teraz Mariko, tak? Zna pan? Znam. Aha.
Parokrotnie.
Nie, ale to pan, bo chciał pan swoją, tak?
Nie, ja tylko chciałem zobaczyć, gdzie to jest, czy znajdę.
Aha, nie, znajdzie pan, to ja tutaj podejdę, tak.
Can you give me Nico's PowerPoint that they had this month?
The shipping?
Yeah, that they had now.
Yeah.
Because I think I missed the 3 or 4 first slides.
Okay.
So that's why. Just, yes, yeah. What's the name? Nolte. Okay, perfect.
And it's
Yes.
a PDF.
Yes. Seems. Ah.
Everything was okay, and when we start presenting,
Yes.
yeah, use those two switching
Yes.
slides, okay?
Okay, everyone. Let's start again. Thank you, Rico, for coming here and sharing with us your insights about fisheries as a stakeholder in marine spatial planning.
Thank you, Andrea. Yes, I'm here kind of representing fisheries interest. Well, I'm actually social scientist at Finnish Environment Institute, and I have over the years I have studied fisheries-related issues, fish farming issues, and especially the marine protection issues, and now in more recent years is focusing more and more on maritime spatial planning. And at our institute we have 3 of these different centers. I'm from Environmental Policy Center, but we have also Marine Research Center, and I work quite a lot with our marine scientists. So now I'm here talking of fisheries in relation to maritime spatial planning, and I start with 3 kind of issues that are commonly related to maritime spatial planning. And as Nico already mentioned, the one of the first ones is that there's traditional uses like fisheries, and now they're competing with new ones. And then another one is that fishing that is by nature quite mobile, it fits quite badly with MSP that is more static approach. And then the third argument is that fishermen are not heard in decision making. And in my presentation I will actually, the main point here is to discuss how to take into account fisheries in a marine planning process, and here I'm really talking of the process, and I think that in this kind of courses on maritime spatial planning we should think separately the process itself and then the product, the marine plan, which is the output of the process. But here we should think of how to get the processes better. Okay, then the first point was already brought up by Nico, and here I'm referring to in my presentation to some published sources and also to interviews that I have conducted over years, and I think that it actually was yesterday mentioned by Heitze Siemens was the impact assessment that was done by the Commission before they launched the draft or proposed the directive for MSP and ICM, and that actually that document that is online, it is quite interesting analysis of issues related to maritime spatial planning. So it's online, and you should take a look at it. But there it's also mentioned that that competition for space between traditional uses and the new ones is increasing, and it will increase in the future. That's the for most of the sea areas, and it's also mentioned that in practice it means losses to fisheries sector, because fisheries, they are probably losing fishing areas, and also shipping was mentioned as one of the that will face economic losses because longer routes that they have to take and so forth. But then in an interview, this the same thing was mentioned a bit more vivid way. There was I interviewed the Finnish Fishermen's Association lead person, and we discussed about maritime spatial planning, and he said that in general the thing is that fishing is suppressed more and more, and now they are only left a small corner, and the reason is that other users are much more powerful than fishers. And of course this is kind of a thing that's over the years that I have studied fisheries and interviewed fishers, this is they always feel that they are the weak ones and all other environmentalists and other people are the strong ones. Okay, and then well, you have probably seen this kind of matrices of the compatibility and incompatibility of maritime activities, and at least if you have done your homework, I think the step-by-step guideline was one of the suggested reading, and there is also this kind of, and this is from the impact assessment, and there's a discussion of what kind of activities are in conflict with each other, and well, fishing has several issues for instance with energy production and also with aquaculture, and possibly also with marine tourism, but I will not dwell on this. And then the second argument is that fishing that is mobile, it fits quite badly with MSP that is more like a static approach. And well, the same argument that you can hear from fishers all over the world, I would say that they say that, you know, we can't give any areas away. You know, we need them all. We need the whole sea. We have always fished there, and we can't give anything away. And the argument is that because we are so mobile, we are not dependent only on one spot. And then another argument, it's a bit more analytical, is from the Baltic Sea RAC. Do you know what RAC is, or what RACs are? Yes, they are regional advisory councils that they are part of the EU fisheries decision-making system. That when the last reform of the common fisheries policy was launched, then these RACs were established, and they are councils of mainly of fisheries organizations, but also other stakeholders of fisheries like environmental NGOs, and they kind of represent the regional sea perspective and give their comments on various aspects of fisheries management, EU fisheries management. But so they in their response to this, in the impact assessment for the MSP directive, there was a survey by the Commission, and they in their response they said that, well, fish move about, and so fisheries move about too, so that it's important for the sector to be able to document by means of good data that the fishery has a place, and that this place is dynamic, both physical and temporal senses. And I think that especially the bold thing here captures quite nicely the thing that fishery has a place, but it is a dynamic place, and I think this is just by accident, but this kind of thinking is has been in recent years in theoretical geography, when in the discussion of what is space and place and spatiality, and this kind of fits this idea of dynamic place, fits quite nice, but I suppose that's just an accident. But I like that because, you know, I've been reading quite a lot of human geography in recent years, and this fits quite well. But in a sense, it is true. Okay, and then if we take some data to discuss this, and this is from HELCOM map service. They have a quite nice interactive map service where you can play with different kind of data sets. They have a huge data sets. Of course, there are certain limitations with it. Well, here I have taken just for an example the water and pelagic troll catches from 2007. And these are squares. These are the ICES, the International Council for Exploration of Seas. This is the kind of the reporting system that countries report their catches, and then ICES gives their scientific advice to the European Commission when Commission decides about the quotas and so forth. And this is the way of reporting catches. The squares are approximately 50 kilometers by 50 kilometers. And so here you can see that, well, trawling takes place almost everywhere, but there are clearly certain areas that are more important than others. So, and this is generally true about fishing in a sense that most of the catch is usually taken, if you take any boat, most of the catch is taken from rather small area, but not only in that area. So they are more dependent on certain places, but they have also options of fishing in a larger areas, especially when we're talking of trawling and other mobile fisheries. And then if we take a bit closer look at the Bothnian Sea, and there was I think this book was also on display, the Plan Bothnia final report. This is a great book, award-winning book, although I think the awards were for design and not for the content, but never mind, it's a beautiful book and really worth reading, and it's online from planbothnia.org. Only 12 megabytes, but never mind. But so here is on herring trawling. Yeah, you can see the colors. So herring trawling from 2007 to 2009, and this is combined information from the catch statistics and also from the vessel monitoring system information that Manuel Frias and Hermanni Backer, I suppose it was Manuel who did this analysis from HELCOM, they combined these two, and they could go to quite deeply into, quite on a small scale when well, the catch is in these larger squares, but with this vessel monitoring system data, they could make an analysis where the fish is caught in a more detailed way. And so we can see here that there are certain hotspots. Well, the darker color means that there is more intensive fishing in those areas, and so they occupy almost the whole sea, but with certain hotspots. But if we then look at a bit closer the temporal dimensions of different seasons, and then the picture gets more diverse in a sense that that in the first half of the year there are certain places, but then the second half of the year gets a bit more for different locations, and also in the interview of fishermen, when a skipper chooses where to fish, it depends on the what is demand at the market, what kind of fish. For instance, in herring, there's a lot of industrial fishing, and then you can make a very long draw hauls. I think, is it hauls when they're dragging them? You can do it a long time when the several hours, and then the herring that was caught first, they become inedible because it's a big mess of fish in the end. But that is fine for the industrial use. But if you catch fish for human consumption, then you have a very different way of fishing, much shorter time, and so that you get better quality fish. So there is a mobility in fisheries that has to be taken into account, of course. And then the third point is what in Plan Bothnia they studied the spawning areas and also possible spawning areas. There they had data only of very few areas, mostly on the Swedish side, but then there are kind of potential spawning areas. And this is also an important thing to understand, that fisheries, even though they're catching fish in these kind of in these important areas, but to be able to catch fish, just preserving the spawning areas is also an important part of the system of fisheries. And so the point here is that fishing is mobile, and this presentation of mobility would be much better if we had more accurate data on the routes where the actual boats go really, and where are the ports, and so they are dependent on certain routes more than on others. But then if we take a look at coastal fisheries from this same area from my previous and ongoing studies, well, the point is that actually not all fishing is mobile, because coastal fishermen, they usually have a very different spatial strategy. While trawlers, they go out at sea and hunt for the fish, but these coastal fishers, they stay at their place and they wait fish to come to them. So here the fish are the more mobile than the fisheries itself. And the picture on the left, this is from my own ongoing project. I interviewed a fisherman whose fishing harbor is here. He's a leader of the local fisheries organization, and we discussed about where the local fishermen, where they fish. And he himself, he fishes in this area which is around 5 kilometers. So it's a very small compared to the trawling that go all over the place. And then the 14 fishermen, who most of them land here in the municipal fish harbor, they fish in this rather small area. And so these guys are, well, there are, for instance, 2 fishermen fish only in this one bay, and so forth. So most of them have this kind of small areas, and so they are very dependent on specific spots, because of the economics of small-scale fishing is such that if they would go fishing somewhere here, then the expenses would be too much, so that it's not simply viable. So they are very dependent, which has to be taken into account in the dependency has to be taken into account in planning. And here's another picture of a bit older study. This is unfortunately a bit messy. Here is well, the black lines here, they are municipal borders, and the red lines are borders of fisheries management areas. You don't need to care about them. The green dots, they are houses of fishermen. There are some 200, a bit more than 200 fishermen in this area, and these blue dots are their trap nets. And the lines is, well, we didn't have data on where they have their boats, but connecting that just to have we wanted to have some course idea of the kind of distances they have, and so it's about 10, 20 kilometers distances from their ports. Yep. Yes, I'm just coming to that. That's a good question. It's the next slide. So yes, they have an obligation to report where they catch fish, and we in that study we studied these 5 statistical squares, and this is the coastal fishers. They report every month what they caught according to this statistical square system. Well, the bigger boats, the longer than 50-meter boats, they are in this vessel monitoring system, and there the reporting is much more detailed, and they they report every landing. But in coastal fisheries, it's a bit different thing. But here you can see that if you think of these squares, and well, most of them, they have their trap nets, and in one square. Maybe here here is possibly that there are some fishers who have their trap nets in two different squares. But we studied that a bit, and we have here is the catches from all coastal fishing catches, not only the trap net catch, but all catches from these squares from this a bit old data set, because well, this project started in 2003, this old project. But well, here's the asking from how many squares they catch fish, and well, it's quite clear that almost 90% of them reported catching only from one square. But okay, that's 50 by 50 kilometers square. It's a quite large area. But then there's also interesting one is there's this one guy who reported catching from 4 different squares. And then one starts to wonder that that's 100 kilometers per 100 kilometers area. So it is possible that that this guy who was reporting from 4 squares actually fishing in this small area, but in the statistical system, his catches are coming from the whole region. And with this, when there was almost 90% of these 200 fishermen, they had the same situation of catching from 1 square. So it means that there would be, like 200 of these small squares around these, and been only in one of them. And then another point is that in this statistical square system, it is also possible that someone is actually fishing in relatively large area for a coastal fisherman, but his catches would be only from 1 square. And so this comes to the question of the spatial representations of fishing and the data that can be used for spatial planning. And so it's clear that the statistical squares, even though they are kind of a necessary starting point, we need to have much more detailed information to really understand the spatial dynamics of fishing. And then the third point is and related one, in the sense that well, the fishermen are not heard in decision making, and well, again, the impact assessment, they have recognized that fishermen often complain that they are not heard in designation of Natura 2000 sites and in offshore wind park installations and so forth, and so that there's a worry that the same will happen with MSP, and the similar argument comes from the leader of the Finnish Fishermen Association, and he said that there are only few persons who really understand fishing interest in Finland or cares about them. And the same thing was from the local fishermen that I interviewed, that they have a fear that they will not be heard, that there was some, the bigger interest from the capital city would anyway come over, and so there's a true fear. But then the question is that how to support participation of fishers in these processes. And well, yesterday we discussed quite a lot about participation in planning processes, so it's kind of self-evident we have to make them, we have to consult them, and we have to have their comments on the plans and so forth. But here I will focus on the spatial representation issue, because well, marine spatial planning is very much spatial data driven, and quite technological exercise easily, even to a point that it becomes very technocratic, so that only those voices that can present their argument with the spatial data, they are heard. And it has been recognized in marine management literature that there has been a certain spatial turn in early 2000, when one reason for this is that technology has developed quite fast in recent years, and even though we still lack a lot of data from the marine areas, but we have tools of playing with scarce data, modeling, spatial modeling, and all that stuff. And we have the GPS monitoring systems that provide spatial data with certain limitations. And it has been recognized that fisheries need to become spatially explicit. And there are some examples, for instance, what Dengbol and Wilson studied in the North Sea RAC, and the attitude, that the change of attitudes there, that when they realize that all these offshore wind farm operators, they come and they get the licenses for the area, or at least the reservations for future wind parks, so that that fishers, we have to become spatial as well. And so the way to support participation of fishers in these planning processes is, if we think again of the processes and the kind of data and the tools that we can have to improve the process, and not necessarily the plan itself, but to make the process improved. There's a need for the spatial analysis of fishing. Okay, well, the statistical squares, they are a starting point, because, well, you have to be able to show that these are the areas where we catch the fish, and these are economically important for us, and that's always, well, economic importance is always a good argument in planning processes. That's the argument of almost most of the stakeholders in any way. But the point is that this dynamic place that Baltic Sea RAC was reminding about, this dynamic place of fishing is not only where the fish is caught. Fishermen, of course, they are dependent on the fishing grounds, but they also need the routes to fishing grounds. Well, for instance, like Nico told about the wind energy areas, and that fishing boats, they have now they have a possibility to go through these areas to fishing somewhere else. But in another case, if it had been forbidden, it might have meant that they had higher expenses for steaming to fishing grounds. And also the spawning areas are naturally very important for fishing spatiality, and many more aspects. And the point is just that the catch statistics is necessary, but not enough to understand it. And one tip could be like what they did at Helcom for the Plan Bothnia, is to take a closer look at the catch statistics and the VMS data together. And of course, it could be improved to have a kind of a more closer look at the different vessels' movements and where they are landing their catch and all that, which has been, for instance, done in North America in some studies that have tried to improve the data for marine planning. But then the problem is the coastal fisheries, and especially this combining the catch statistics and VMS data is not possible, because they fish with small boats that are not in the VMS system, so we don't have that detailed data. So you have to go either to study where they fish, or you have to invite fishers to work together with the planners, at least some people, some representative of fishers who can show the places that are important. So what, for instance, Kevin St. Martin has written in several articles, a need of improving the spatial data of fisheries, he's talking of mapping of social landscapes, and in practice, with the lack of the kind of official data, it has to be participatory mapping. And the point is to really understand the spatial and temporal dynamics of fisheries, and also of for instance, the different spatial strategies of mobile fishers and non-mobile ones that have very different dependence on specific spots. And well, of course, here in the case of fisheries, it's also the kind of social and ecological landscapes, the spawning areas and stuff needs to be taken into account. And there are examples of participatory GIS work. Well, one was what the St. Martin and Olabe article shows, but then quite recent in an interesting one was it's published by Karen Alexander and others. They had in OSIS project they worked together with people from Amsterdam in Scotland, the spatial planners or the spatial planning department from Free University of Amsterdam. They have developed a spatial multi-criteria analysis method, and the Scottish, they had the case that was the tidal energy devices and where to locate them, while other stakeholders were shipping and recreational boating, fishing and stuff. And they had it's an iterative process where they had a huge touch screen with the stakeholders. They could, discuss with stakeholders, and then there was the software was running underneath, and they had all possible data there, and so they had a couple of rounds with the stakeholders to really study where would be the optimum places for these new devices. And that's an interesting process. Of course, there are certain problems. For instance, the temporal dimension is not, that method cannot really deal with temporal dimension, but of course it's a thing that is developing and a useful start. But in any case, a kind of a reminder here is that that in marine spatial planning I can't really think that we can do it without mapping. But we have to be understand that maps and statistics, they are always kind of artificial representations of things outside, and so we have to think that what kind of reality your maps and statistics are creating, because there's always something that is excluded, and that is relevant for the participation. So, as a kind of a take-home message, I would say that if you think of the planning processes and how to support it, the first priority would be to understand the spatial and temporal dynamics of the things that you are about to plan. And then the secondary priority is to map that understanding, and well, it's a priority, but the first one is to try to really understand what you are about to plan. And well, I have some reading tips here. I think this presentation will be available online, then you can choose, and here are some of the things that I've used here, and well, especially I like the title of Losing Our Way with Mapping. That's always the case. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Riku, for a very interesting presentation on coastal fisheries, and also the Bothnian part and the planning the Bothnian Sea. I put 2 more copies there on the table. I don't know whether they are still there. It's a very interesting example of trying to plan. It was more on a national level and national experts. It was not a very participatory experiment, but it was very teachable. And what also happened was that they realized that the spawning areas are actually on the Swedish side, whereas the fisheries is happening on the Finnish side. So the Swedes are producing the fish for the Finns. We were talking about this yesterday with regard to wind power. So there's really some kind of interaction.
Yes, true. There's something like a bit less than 50 Finnish boats and 10 Swedish boats in the Bothnian Sea catching this Swedish origin herring.
Yes,
but it's not surströmming, thank God.
Not surströmming, yes, not the fermented herring. Yes, there is room for 1 or 2 questions while you put up your presentation, because then it's going to be yours. So you already have the first question. Yes, can I leave the microphone to you?
Rico, I wonder if you have any approach to calculate the value of the area, the value for fishermen, for fish. I mean, not only fish catches or landings, but also the various services of the area, like spawning grounds or feeding or possibly migration routes.
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, the easy thing is the value of the catch, but then the valuation of ecosystem services of spawning areas. That's well, what we have not done, but it's an interesting thing. And then the kind of the costs and revenues, cost of fishing, the routes, and that kind of should be. But no, we haven't done that. No, it's well. Yeah.
One more question by Thomas.
Is it on?
It's on, yes.
It's not a question. I just wanted to underscore.
You have to hold it more close to your mouth.
Just wanted to underscore the issue about Plan Botnia. It's a very interesting exercise and an attempt to do a plan, but it is not an adapted plan. That's very important to remember, because it's I mean, you read Plan Botnia, but be aware it's not adopted in political in the bureaucracy, either in Sweden or in Finland. It's just a case study.
It's a case study, and it may be used as a base for coming planning. It was a test, so to say, where they tried to find information. And what I would also like to emphasize... Yes, I would. Can I just continue commenting, and I'm picking up the mic with Thomas. What I like to emphasize with fisheries... Jacek, okay. Jacek first. What I would like to emphasize with fisheries is that there is something which is all very close connected also to what you're going to present, and that's the ecological perspective and the larger space and the connections. And here actually fisheries management and ecological interests have had a lot in common during the last years, and I hope we can take this up again in the afternoon, also in the discussions. Please, Jacek.
Simple question. Do you think that maritime spatial planning can improve the situation of fishery, for example, by making artificial reefs or things like that? Or you think that this makes no sense?
Well, personally, I think that there's not to gain from fishers from spatial planning. I mean, because as we know, one of the arguments for maritime spatial planning is that because now the things are done kind of project by project without any kind of a broader understanding of the overall consequences. So in that sense, there is potential for fishers to gain also if they can get their voices heard. And sorry, what was the other point?
For example, making artificial reefs.
Yeah, possibly yes. It can happen. Yeah, it's although there's well, the question of these offshore wind farms as artificial reefs, for instance. That's an interesting one, and they possibly can create a habitat suitable for juvenile fish or larvae, and in that sense help fisheries. Maybe it remains to be seen. Actually,
I can give an example from the Gothenburg area, where the dredging from the harbor actually has been dumped just outside of Gothenburg, and where lobster now has increased considerably. So it depends on what you're doing. You can actually do something for at least a certain type of fish, or crayfish in that case. Lars, it's yours.
I just wanted to make a comment that adds on to what Thomas was saying, which is that Plan Botnia is typical of the problem I pointed to, where strategic planning does not have a politically and deliberated mandate, so it's typically an expert planning. It's a nice case study, but it lacks a very important element of strategic planning.
Thank you, Lars. I think it is time to continue with the next presenter, and I hope we will be able to connect this with the panel discussion. So after one more presentation, I will ask everyone to come forward with his or her chair to sit in the panel, but right now it is your time and your show, beginners. Do you know how to use this one? I'm not so familiar with the Polish and the PC. Okay. And now you'll get the microphone. It's here in this big folder.
Thank you. How to move with this? Okay. What I shall, good morning still. And thank you organizers for inviting me here. I was actually invited on Thursday, and on Friday I became rather ill because of strong allergic reaction. So do not expect from me too much. I am also not professionally involved in nature conservation. I used to be involved and feel myself as a sort of a promoter of nature conservation in Poland and also in Baltic countries because of my activities in HELCOM in the past. Now I feel rather as an observer of what's going on. So maybe it's even better than I have some sort of independent view. I wrote it, Nature Conservation of the Baltic Sea from Ignorance to Exaggeration. Ignorance, I mean, not far past. Only 40 years ago, we were really trying to dump wastes in the Gulf of Gdańsk. And there was, I joined the Sea Fisheries Institute because of the dumping activity as an observer, as a diver, to see what's going on underwater. And that was allowed. It was according to law at that time. And that was phosphogypsum, the industrial waste, which was considered by some others as a neutral and not really making harm to the environment. But luckily we stopped that. And that convention was signed in 1974. So it was before signing convention, Helsinki Convention. And but the real promoters of nature conservation in the Baltic Sea is not Helsinki Commission, is not really HELCOM, although it's a strong player. In fact, the nature conservation is a strong stakeholder. There were some, before that, there were fathers like Bert Ingmar Dibben. I would like to mention him. I hope he's still alive, a Swedish scientist from Baltic marine biologist. And also a Swedish colleague, Bertil Hegerer from WWF Sweden. They raised such a working group and invited 2 persons from each country for establishing future nature conservation activities. And I was one of them, together with Professor Żmudziński, invited from Poland, invited to this group. And we established already basic rules and some sites which should be preserved. And yes, I have some books written by Dibben, Nature Conservation, also for marine areas. That means it was necessary to convince that it was, yes. And also German colleagues joined soon to it. For example, Jochen Lamp, who I know should be expected here, but for some reason he is not. And then Nature Academy in Wilm in Germany, for example, Henning von Nordheim. And Yes, in Poland, or really my interest in nature conservation was really from diving in the Baltic Sea. At that time, the area for diving was open in the whole Baltic Sea. It was quite easy if you work on the research vessel to dive almost everywhere. And I wrote a paper at that time, paper sensitive and high ecological value areas in Poland as a future protected areas for the Baltic Sea. And I trying to send it to Helcom as an official paper from Poland, but I was not allowed at that time. And then I wrote that this was prepared by KMAS Scientific Diver, sort of a personal appeal to do this, to start the nature conservation. And just a short reflection. In 1974, first convention, we call it sometimes first Helsinki Convention, was signed. It has been covering open waters, not territorial sea and not national waters, due to political reasons. USSR didn't like that somebody penetrates the coastal area and have some knowledge about the coastal areas. Sooner after that, monitoring has started, and first monitoring was from hydrological parameters, then slowly chemical parameters were joining, then biological parameters, and then nature conservation appeared at the very late. So nature conservation is really from 1993, so it's not very old as you see, 20 years activities, but very strong player already supported by the European Union very much. And already this group, Baltic Marine Biologists and WWF, has already designed some areas for the Baltic Sea for protection. There was 50, 60, then finally 62 areas, including Polish area, including some areas which were not adopted by the Polish government. For example, the nature reserve within Gdynia, we wanted to establish the so-called Orlovo Nature Reserve. It has not been, for some reason, adopted. And this is finally how it looks like, present Baltic Sea protected areas. The system of 62 areas, there is a special recommendation 15/5 under Helcom, and these areas are mentioned. And of course, there is a problem of management of these areas, because identifying and establishing is one thing, and managing is a further need to that. And I will not talk very much about Natura 2000 areas, because I think everybody really knows that we have this Natura 2000 areas, and this is a strong obligation. So if Helcom, we can talk about soft law, it's rather moral obligation that countries adopt these areas, that countries respect for nature conservation, that countries will not do any harmful activities to selected protection items or issues. And so Natura 2000 is a hard obligation, and there is no chance to avoid it or even to discuss with this. But as far as, I think that MSP simply has to adopt this. And of course, BSPR, I think is included or will be included in under Natura 2000. So really, this hard player will stay as a Natura 2000 areas. So now is very important is how this Natura 2000 areas will be treated in the plans, which in protection and management plans, because there is a need to establish protection and management plans. And I think that marine spatial planning should be there, because we observe, at least in Poland, a lot of exaggeration about nature conservation. So it's a very fresh, very new, only 20 years, let us say, old, and already they are voices, they are scientists, they are lobbyists, they are non-NGO organizations saying protect, protect, protect everything. So we should not go to protection paranoia, really. So, for example, imbalance to strong measures to protect some emotional species. Protect seals in Poland, protect the harbor porpoise, okay. But we have to consider that seals were here before the war, and there was climate rather different. And there was also, our coast was rather, Baltic coast, not so occupied and not so intensively fished. So seals moved to the north. And already, as far as I know, Finland and Sweden are able to reduce this stock of seals. And we are putting a lot of money to save them and to release them to the Baltic Sea, which when they travel to the north, they can be shot even. Because legally, yes. So should be a balanced really approach. I say yes, we should, let us say, have to this in mind, but not necessary to put too much national money for that. And there are proposals to close some areas. For example, to close Puck Bay area for sport activities. And I think it would be a wrong approach because we are part of the system. People are used to play there with the yachts, with surfing boats, etc. Maybe we should reduce these noisy engine boats. Maybe we should establish some areas where this is allowed and some areas where it is not allowed. I see it in a Kilbyte, for example, which is very well regulated. There are some areas which you can use even for engine boats. And there are some proposals to establish conservation areas without clear reasons. For example, because they are shallow, because of their banks. Establish area because this is a bank, let us say middle bank. I was visiting a few times. I don't say I have a map of the middle bank, but there is really nothing there, and nothing which I would say, knowing the Baltic nature, there is some for special protection. I agree with the Slopes Bank, with the other banks, but I do not see any reasons the bank, which can well be middle bank, which can well be used for example, construction of windmill parks there. And there we have protection measures without setting limits, let us say cormorants or other species. We protect these birds, but they don't have natural enemies. And therefore they expand it to such a way that they do harm for fishery, for coastal trees, and for coastal strip. And it's impossible to reintroduce some fish in the Puck Bay because cormorants eat everything. When they are growing a little bit, they will eat them. And I think they should be reduced. By the way, they were never in a historical time in this bay. So why to keep them? Let us say in a certain place, certain number of nests, but not just unlimited protection because they are written for that. There are also some needs for protection. It's my private opinion rather than common opinion. I think that coastal dynamics, in some cases, even erosion should be protected. It's a natural process. We should accept that these changes will be because they are natural changes. Let us say some flooding should be accepted. If we have salt meadows historically, why to drain them? We should protect this as well. This process of flooding. And there is a lot of destruction to coastal wetlands. I don't know, MSP probably will not cover, or maybe will also include coastal wetlands, which are also a stripe for protection of the Baltic Sea against eutrophication. And a rather difficult issue to know ecosystem, to know what's happening there, and there are some processes in the ecosystem should be protected. I mean, if we think about ecosystem, we think about goods and services. So goods are well known because they have market value, but services of the system not quite well known even by scientists, and sometimes I think they should be considered to the extent we know about them, protection of processes. And also protection of coastal landscape. There is a lot of destruction, at least along the Polish coast, with this protection of coast against erosion. You will see that. It's not only a landscape also. It's also that this hydrology of this area, it's completely changed. It's coming to a stronger erosion. I was trying to snorkel here. It's not the natural system of underwater reefs and underwater sandy looking coast. So it's some dependencies. Of course, erosion is still coming here, and erosion is coming somewhere else because of that activity, and with a terrible landscape. And this is a picture about cormorants in Pusk Bay. But so it's an old picture, but I would like to say that there will be unavoidable that this is our Natura 2000 area. It has been declared, I think, too much. I do not see any special reasons to declare it in many places, Natura 2000 areas. There are no special species or special other reasons. There are ports here, fishing ports and other ports. There will be activities with port channels, etc. Why to protect them? And also there will be necessary to take, let us say, cables, high voltage power cables through these areas. So we have, in spite of this is Natura 2000, we'll have to solve this, how to go with pipes and cables to the Natura 2000. This is an example how we handled cable between Poland and Sweden, so-called SWEPO link, high voltage power cable between Poland and Sweden. And there was strong protest, the very first, the shortest way to Karlshamn from Poland, but there was strong protest of local communities due to tourism, etc., that this will be destroyed. So we moved to military polygon near Ustka. But there were also, that was really my activity to turn it like that. It cost, I think, some millions, unfortunately, because I proposed to design this BSPA, which was adopted by HELCOM, not to go through the BSPA, although I'm not fully convinced that it would do any harm for this. But even founders, even investors, they didn't like to go through the BSPA. They wanted to be very ecological and would like to show that they respect ecology, and they will that will surround this BSPA, proposed BSPA, but still it goes through the area Natura 2000 right now. So some conclusions that MSPA have to adopt these areas simply. BSPA will be included under Natura 2000, so practically under MSP should adopt these areas. It's clear. Many is a part of the marine ecosystem and shall be present in protected areas as well, in some ways, some limited way, not unlimited, of course. Prohibitions must be carefully introduced and limited to carefully selected areas. For example, full prohibitions when you have no access to the area, only to nature reserve. MSP should be involved in preparation of management and protection plans, which is ongoing activity, management and protection plans for selected Natura 2000 areas. So we already, I think, Marine Special Planning should be present there because they very often are administrators and have some imagination how to protect almost everything. And I think not necessarily know about other activities. Well, finally, this is a good example of how to solve protection and activities as well. This is so-called herring march in Poland. By the way, you are please invited if you want to come every year that is in July. A march through the Put Bay on the shallow underwater reef, but also if you are able to walk 10 kilometers like that and swim 2 kilometers, you may go. You'll be definitely accepted for that, and become very popular. And suddenly it was too much, and the Maritime Office in Gdynia decided to limit this to 100 persons once a year. And I think it's a very good option for MSP and also for preserving and limiting activities as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eugenius. It was very interesting, and that sounds like an interesting challenge for a few of us. We will keep that in mind. Maybe we could do an MSP team participating in the march.
I think you should do this.
Yes. Now I think we will have, because there's always so many interesting questions and good discussions, and I would also like to allow Eugenius to answer a few questions at the same time as Julius is preparing for his presentation on energy as a stakeholder. And I would like to introduce that we are making a change of schedule, that we will have the panel actually at the end of the World Café session, and then give the presenters a possibility to give their personal views. And for Nico, this will mean that you give your personal view during the group work just after lunch. Okay, two questions, 2 microphones.
Okay, actually I have one comment, probably because Eugeniusz has been criticizing probably the number of Nature 2000 areas we have in Poland. But what I'm actually seeing from the wider perspective is more or less like this. In some countries where you build up based on the knowledge, the nature conservation, you assume that since we have a bird directive, Nature 2000 areas in the coastal regions, it means that there are birds there. And the problem is that now I've seen in the HELCOM documents that birds fly there because we have Nature 2000. And the problem is that we didn't have even a good knowledge about whether the birds are there, but we just presumed they should be there because this coastal area. And that's, one of the problems that we create by ourselves, myths about, what is really required to be conserved. And yeah, we discussed this a lot before, so we know our positions. But I really think that the nature conservation should be really fact-based, not just not only precautionary measure, because precautionary measure probably we can start up, but then we have to really go into the fact-based nature conservation, because otherwise we will lose. Let's say the people who lose jobs and so on, they will in turn make it very difficult to protect in the future.
Would you like to have a reply to that, or
well, about these birds, for example, I see some areas the birds should be present, therefore we should protect them. But I know that birds everybody knows birds are not stupid. They will not sit on a very deep place when there is no food down, but they will move to the shallow places when there is food easily available. And there is sometimes no reason for protection of the whole bank because it's rather shallow. But there are shallower places there where the birds really are.
My name is Ilona. Do you mention that there is a plan, or there was a plan to exclude the Puck Bay from sport activity? Do you know do you know some information about economic value of touristic services provided by Gulf of Gdańsk or Puck Bay?
Well, it's a very big value because we are not like in Sweden or Finland that we have a very long coast and a lot of islands and a lot of bays and skerries, etc. It's a one bay suitable for sport activities, and the pressure is enormous really on that bay. People from Warsaw are mainly there and coming for. By the way, it's a very good surfing place. I think possibly the best in the Baltic with the regular wind and also large area, also safe area because there is that underwater reef and sometimes coming above the water where you can safely land there. So, but of course, I am not saying that these are our authorities who wants to exclude, but there is a pressure from some ecologists that some NGOs that this should be closed, and there is a pressure of individual scientists as well because of that.
Thank you. And one comment, or my opinion. I don't agree with you that cormorants eat everything. I mean, every type of fish. It's probably not true.
Every time what?
Of fish. Every fish and everything. It's not.
Well,
true.
I know this from fishermen. I know this from the effort of reintroducing fish in the bay. They studied this effects of in scientists, and they are and also stomachs of birds, and they are eaten by cormorants. But cormorants were never historically in this bay, so they are expanding from let us say, from areas like Vistula Lagoon, where they were present historically. And now it's interesting thing because when we have this Neogobius, the newcomer to the bay, it's a lot of this Neogobius. There is a food for them. They like this food, but also it's other fishes, of course.
I think we have to be aware with regard to conservation that ecosystems are changing as well. And if we are talking about conservation, we are always talking about what kind of state do we want to conserve with our conservation areas, and also in relation to cormorants and all these other kinds of organisms. And I just see your list about the 4 too much protection areas. These are actually the exact conflicts we can also have in Sweden about this type of nature protection. And I'm not taking any position here, but I rather would like to have you to have this kind of discussions in the afternoons and in the next days, because that's actually what is happening between stakeholders. So you can feel the feeling of being a stakeholder.
I was underlying this because I think there will be a conflict or unavoidable conflict between when during the process of maritime spatial planning, some organizations, some people, some lobbies will not be happy about what will be settled in MSP. So, and also that there is simply MSP has to accept this EU directives like Bird Directive, like Habitat Directive, which is basically creating Natura 2000 areas. There is no other choice, of course. And these areas shall be used as well to some extent. Like we have this infrastructure for wind farms, and this infrastructure will definitely go through these Natura 2000 areas. Thank you.
Let's switch mics now.
Okay. Oop. I hope you can hear me. Definitely, I think I don't need a microphone if I if I speak without this. I should be heard anyhow. So I have a problem. I have only 18 minutes and probably too many slides, but I was asked to talk a little bit about the energy and probably some other stakeholders which are not reflected too much so far. And what I want to talk about is also, let's say, just to put some, okay, just to frame it. I will not give you an answers. Probably I will only seed you to think a little bit about different aspects of some of the special uses. So what kind of those different types of uses, then what might be a special requirements for different users. I mean, risk, both directions. I mean, risk from other users to the specific use or vice versa, because it always has to be more or less calculated. Whether we can do something with the MSP in mind with the risk handling, avoiding whatsoever, and where there is a potential for co-location, co-use. And again, coming back to the history. Let's say this is my personal view on the what was first. Of course, we can argue whether fishing was first and navigation then. Probably first somebody had to see a fish and and that's, you know, that's the reason. But this is what has been told many times today. I mean, the use of the sea is very much dependent on the history. So fishing and navigation is some kind of, I mean, these are those guys who are sitting there for thousands of years, and they just don't want to have newcomers, let's say, to intervene. So then we've got, let's say, military guys, let's say probably in Phoenician or Roman times going to conquer another countries. Then there have been people studying aquaculture, simple one, but then the tourism, which is quite new. And then we've got an oil and gas transport as a consequence. Then later on came nature protection, which is, most of us do not know it, but it's quite a fresh use at the sea. Energy, which first we've got cables, so electricity transport. Then we came with energy wind farms and other sources, where energy other sources also think, for example, desalination plants or more complicated stuff. So, how it looks like in Poland? Yeah, we have different types of uses. Actually, on this map there was an. I'm just looking where the. Oh yeah, this was an area which was pretending to be good for offshore wind farms. So we cut off, you know, a nature protection, some military stuff which you can see. Then there was, let's say, oil and gas exploration licensing and so on. So there is a lot of those activities. Some of them, of course, overlap, like Evgeny already taught. I mean, yeah, cables and the nature protection and so on. So there are, let's say, different uses, and I will just talk briefly about some of them as examples. And let us see. I mean, this is just military grants. What the problem with the military guys is, at least here in Poland, but probably it's exactly the same in all the countries, that actually they do not express their needs. What we can show on the maps is probably something what they are able to announce, but in Poland, actually, military guys, they claim 60% of the Polish EEZ as something what you cannot touch. For many reasons, probably granting places for submarines and so on, and, you know, all the more deep parts of the Polish waters, they might be, let's say, a granting place for submarines, because you know, we have only few places where you cannot be spotted from the satellite with the submarine. So, I mean, that's, you know, this is something. Let's say, Andrea, you are laughing, but the problem in Sweden, for example, is even worse. I believe. But they claim 60%. But what the problem is? They do not disclose information. Why, for what, and where, and when, probably also. So that's the biggest problem. So Riku taught about the fisheries, mobile and so on, but but at least we can try to extract this information from the fishermen. I still believe that the fishermen, they don't want to share this information for many reasons, because these are the grants, let's say, which the grandfather and father have been fishing, so they know the place and they don't want to disclose this information. But I think we can iteratively go forth and back. But with military guys, there is no discussion. They just inform you. And the funny stuff was when we asked what are the areas where you can plan offshore wind farms, they said, yes, we cannot tell you yes, that you can have it, because then it means that there is no military interest. And we cannot tell you no, because if you know that there is a military interest, then of course we disclose this information, and that's a very very funny stuff. Quite often they simply don't give you any arguments. They just say, okay, there is a National Defense Act, you are thrown away, you cannot do anything. And another stuff is we sometimes forget that, for example, if you look at the offshore wind farms, they just attack you from any side. You know, they can tell you that they have a shooting ground where they shoot, let's say, some anti-airplane missiles, and they don't want to have it. And there is a very nice anecdote. One of my colleagues have been on the meeting where the people from offshore wind farms, they have been discussing use of this area for offshore wind farms, and they even told that we accept 2% of losses. You know, that was something what should never happen. But the Navy guys, they didn't want to accept this type of stuff. But here you have the shooting, so they just go from the land, and they occupied quite a space. While on the other side, for example, for the deep water, this is what I told about the submarines and so on. Then from the surface, of course, navigation routes for the Navy, and from the air, because offshore wind farms, actually, they are also very limited by routes of the low flights, which are done routinely. So you could see that it's not known, and on the other side, there is a lot of different activities which we have to take into account. So at least example offshore wind farms. Okay, when you look at the Polish examples, all those here, they are more or less locations where somebody applied for the offshore wind farm in that particular area. But of course, they all claim more sea area than is feasible, and I will show in a few minutes. Okay. For the time being, it's a stuff which is not mature enough, and mature enough not only in technical sense. Okay, we can put a lot of wind farms, but do we really, as society, really need them, or that many as we plan, or people would like to plan? We don't have a feed-in tariff. Germany has Germans have feed-in tariff, but now they realize that probably there is too much. And it will cost too much. So I would say there is a problem that as a newcomer, we just look at the sea as there would be nothing there, and we just want to occupy another area. So we stack people more or less on top of each other. And then let us see what has happened. I mean, those gray ones, they are the granted permits. And when we go further, there are, let's say, something what is paid, okay, where you pay stamp duties to keep the permit, let's say, valid. So there are only few of them who pay this. The rest actually disappeared, or let's say expired, because they haven't been paid. So you always have to judge whether the interest is real or is speculative, more or less. So sometimes, and this is the same when it comes to the fishery. For example, everybody says, yes, we want to have the whole area accessible, but we don't want to really express what is really valuable for us. Sometimes it's because we want to keep it secret. Okay. Okay, what is what is the next differentiation between users? And from the special point of view, of course, more or less, we have areas and we have points where we have some installations. Sometimes we have linear installations. And And of course, from geographic point of view, you would like always to make some kind of categorization. But what I'm saying, I mean, whether the fishery is, for example, specially non-specific use, I don't know. I mean, the fishery can be point, can be trolls, can be also, let's say, we can think in the terms of areas. But for some reasons, we have certain areas. For some reasons, we have just, you know, yeah, probably it can be trolled anywhere where it's allowed. So we have a point installation. So we have, for example, aquaculture or oil and gas platforms. This is just point installation, and like wave tide or other generators. And then, of course, we have these transport lines. This is something what from the special planning point of view is, I think, the worst stuff, because this is something what divides the area. And for example, in Poland, we are very much looking into joining several, let's say, linear installations in order to keep those infrastructure corridors and to make it more tidy. I didn't want to put, let's say, well-known Dutch MSP picture where you have all those cables crossing and so on, and actually dividing the whole space into very small pieces. Okay, and something what I would call stationary users and portable users. There is something what we cannot move. Like, okay, we can only have oil and gas where there is oil and gas. And that's something what we have to have in mind, that we cannot move it. And probably, like, I don't know, this reverse osmosis power plant, they can only be done on the river mouths, where there's difference between fresh water and the salty water, for example, for desalination, for example. So, and then, of course, there is a question, do we want to protect space for stationary users? Or let's say I can give you a Polish example, and of course I'm biased by Polish examples, but I hope it could be understood, that our minister responsible for hydrocarbon extraction in general, he believes that we will have a shale gas exploitation on the Polish waters. So he would propose actually that we keep, or let's say we get all offshore wind farms out of the Polish waters, because probably in 30 years' time we may have a shale gas and extraction. And I'm claiming, okay, guys, wake up, you know, we have problems on land. At sea it will be tripled or doubled or whatever. Why shall we do it at sea while we have almost infinite resources on land, which we don't know how to use? But, you know, that's the question. Politically, it's a problem. So do we, I mean, the question which we have to ask during planning, do we want to protect some areas? Probably also for new users in the future. That's one of the problems. So, and let's say some people are thinking offshore wind farms are portable, more or less. And I'm just giving this example of some of the studies which we made a few years ago, where we just made the more or less line. All the green areas, there are areas where the benefit to cost ratio is over 1, which means it can pay off. So it is not really that it's portable, or you can move it from one place to the other. You also have to have this type of analysis in your mind when doing special planning. And you have to remember, energy is all about money, like oil and gas and so on. So, what are the potential spatial requirements for different types of users? And this is quite easy actually to do, let's say, to assess for oil and gas. I mean, there's a safety zone buffer plus navigation access. That's, you know, that's easy. So Nico told about the UNCLOS. Okay, we have this 500-meter buffer, and probably this is everything what we need for this, let's say, point type of what? No, okay, but I will about the risk. I mean, and this is the different stuff. You also have to remember, environmental impact assessment always says about normal operation. What is going on during an accident is another story. I mean, oil spill from oil and gas actually is an accidental stuff. Or at least nobody assumes that they will spill it day by day. So that's the way. So for the transport, we have safety buffers along pipelines and cables, and then we have then we have military, what you cannot assess anything unless they want to express themselves. And for example, we can have some locations if we want to have, I don't know, reverse osmosis power plant, which I know Norwegian are playing now with some very preliminary installations. Then we have river mouths. So probably we can structure this around some stuff for the wind farms, and that's a funny story. I mean, I would like to say that, like with, for example, we have this nature protection in Poland, where we got this, let's say, why we had so many Nature 2000, because we haven't fulfilled some targets on land, so it was easier, to catch them, to introducing Nature 2000 areas at sea. That is more or less the same when you look at the offshore wind farms in Poland. I mean, you see this is a number of applications, more or less. There is more of them, but what we think is feasible to be installed is something like 2 gigawatts, and probably 2 to 6 gigawatts. And just look at this. If we just install 2 megawatts per square kilometer, which is a very lazy figure, because probably 10 is good, but probably 6 is feasible in order to not to have too many wake losses, and this is always a density of installation is somehow dependent on the technology, but also on the some kind of optimization between wake losses. If you have too close wind offshore wind turbines, you get too much losses. If you get too far away from each other, then the cable becomes a cost factor. So you play the game, but the latest figures I've seen, that something what you can expect is from something like 6 megawatts per square kilometer. But let us look at this. I mean, we have asked for so many. We probably can only do as many because we can only connect that amount to the national grid. So you have to look. I mean, this is at the lowest density, but just look how it looks like when we just are about the right figure. It's just like this, and we ask for that space. And technologically, probably in a few years' time, we will be somewhere like here. Again, it's just trying to occupy as much as possible area, so it's more or less speculative. Okay, and then risk. When we, for example, think on oil and gas platforms, what we should consider, I mean, as a platform, we can generate a navigation danger. And that's, of course, what we shall calculate. And there is an procedure and so on, how to calculate the risk from navigation. And then, of course, the potential casualties, fire risk, and it means the whole long safety procedures and so on, which you have to implement. Then, of course, oil spills, or generally pollution. Because we mostly think oil and gas means oil spills. However, there are also other stuff, other chemical agents which are used and so on, which you can see. So it's not like very simple game only with oil spills. Okay, and what may happen towards the platform? Okay, there might be people who will drive into, so there will be collisions. So and then we have some limitations by existing structure. We have discussion. If we allow for offshore wind farm, then we will not be able to put up a platform there, for example. And that's a part of the discussion. Quite usually, I see it as a sectoral discussion about who is more in power, hydrocarbons or, those responsible for the energy production. So it's expressed at a very high political level. And then, of course, we are fixed to the resource, and that's a problem. If somebody puts on the top of my resource something what will not allow for construction of the platform, then of course I will not be able to do it. Then still there is a human error factor, and this is something what people do not underestimate. I mean, the problem is that I can make a mistake in exploitation of my field, and very soon I can expect that I will get the oil for 30 years, and after 3 months, for example, I can get the whole oil stop because of some technical reasons. And then, of course, there is a problem with the weather. But, okay, I always try to find out something positive. Okay, it can help with the terrestrial navigation at sea, in that sense that you have a good mark and you know how to avoid it, and you see it on the EGDIS if you have a system, and so on. So there are some positive things. Yeah, when you look at the transport lines, of course, this is navigation danger, especially for fishery. I mean, bottom trawls should be avoided, or there is costly procedure actually to make pipelines or cables resistant to bottom trawling. And then, of course, for oil pipelines, then, of course, oil spills, general pollution is a problem. Yeah, what is important that all those transport lines actually more or less fix something what is on the sea with something what is on the shore, which means there is this connection or link between maritime spatial planning and the land planning, because probably also the reception facilities onshore, they are only limited, and quite often what I can tell you that for cables at sea, it's much easier to get environmental permits today than to get it through all the way at land. So at least the investors coming and saying, yes, please select as the best place to locate the cable, they claim, okay, but you have to enter here or here because that's the only way we can get on land. So that's extremely important, and of course I'm just okay. It's not a joke. It can help marine life to grow. Offshore wind farms, we have simply different pollution, which is mostly noise, for example, and we have more technical limitations. We have depth limits, so we are. So we are in a little bit more difficult situation. And then, of course, with the electricity transport, there is less risks for outer world. Okay, I mean, we can go through all these different stuff, looking for different possibilities. What are the risks? But what I would like only to ask you always when you think maritime spatial planning to look at those risks, because that's important, and especially that finally risk means money. If we allow fishermen to enter offshore wind farms, probably both offshore wind farm owner and ship owners or the vessel fishery boats owners, they will get the insurance rates higher. And that's, there's always a game where the money is in place. So let's say some stuff. Let's say I'm quite skeptical about. Okay, I have to. Yeah, I'm sorry. Let's say what are the problems with and whether we can really do a conflict resolution for the MSP. I haven't found so far, let's say, MSP where we have a real conflict resolution, and it's mostly because there is no private property at sea. So if we don't have a real over ownership, we own it, but we do not care that much in most cases. And quite often there is, expert plans, they are not taken into account. And this is, let's say, what has been said about Botnia plan. What I tend with our pilot cases, what I've seen with them is more or less that they are environmentally biased. Because if they are not adopted or, let's say, legally binding, usually the people do not fight for the users, like fishermen. They believe that, okay, environmentalists, they will put so many constraints that they don't want even to enter discussion. But this is what I told. For energy and military sectors, discussion is very limited, and sometimes I tell money talks. If there is a political wish to have oil and gas, there will be oil and gas. If there is no political wish to have oil and gas, there will be no oil and gas. And for the fishery and nature conservation, there is a highly emotional discussion. there's quite often no reason. And then, of course, when I always think when we do MSP or any planning, it should not just confirm the status. Quite often, what we do is we just confirm the status. So we count all the users we have and we make a map. Quite often, it's from my point of view, it's not a plan at all. Then, of course, you have a classic troublemakers. So those interfaces from the energy point of view, renewable energy versus this type of users and oil and gas and so on. That's something what will happen sooner or later. And then co-users, and this is my last slide. There is a belief, at least in theoretical world or scientific world, that the co-users should help planning. The problem is that we all believe it should be economically feasible, but there is no real examples so far on the industrial scale. Probably, a small aquaculture on one of the wind turbines. Yes, okay. I mean, this has never happened so far. I mean, this is as you can see, it's more or less art, still from the scientific article. And then, of course, you have this probably offshore wind farms, and aquaculture is the first best guess candidate. But who knows? Okay, I can't talk much more, but I think I should stop now. Thank you.
Thank you, Julius, for your very interesting presentation and showing us there's a lot of still more conflicts we haven't known about. I would give one person the occasion to ask a question and Julius to answer, while I am asking all the presenters of this morning to please come forward, because we would like to give you a little gift. So one question. Who has a question to Julius? No questions? No comment? Everybody wants to have lunch. I think that's the reason.
Yeah. It's always difficult to be the last one.
Thank you anyway, Julius. Someone is missing? I counted at least 5 persons.
Yes, we are really grateful for all these stakeholder views that you have been giving, and want to thank you for this. But first of all, I would like to thank Nico Nolte for the huge contribution to this course that you have been making for us, not only today, but also yesterday. So first of all, big thanks to Nico. And what we have here is some small memory, not taking too much place in your bag, to keep us on the right course. This is a compass.
Thank you.
And a small magnet with a map.
Thank you very much for that. That
Thank
was
you.
really my pleasure.
Thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, and we will have also for the others a similar gift. Thank you for coming.